Story 1. When I was a child, my babysitter's boyfriend discovered that the man he thought was his father was not his biological father. The story was that his oldest brother, who had a criminal conviction for molestation, told him that he was his real father and that the boy was the result of the oldest brother abusing their mother. The boy confirmed this with his mother. Once he knew the truth, he took his own life. The worst part of the story is that the entire family was deeply troubled. But this boy was a kind and good person. Story 2. There was a sudden increase in pregnancies, and from what I heard, it was all because of the same man. Story 3. A group of children started selling and using synthetic marijuana because it was not technically illegal. It was known as JWH. One day, several boys smoked it together during break and then went to their separate classes. Suddenly, they all became sick and some had seizures. People feared it was a gas leak or some type of environmental contaminant because children in different classes were experiencing seizures or vomiting. When the truth was revealed, the children involved were not allowed to graduate and had their college acceptance revoked. Story 4. A college professor was shot dead on campus. Police said he shot himself in the head, walked 50 feet to a garbage dumpster, threw away the gun and his wallet, then walked the same 50 feet back to where he shot himself. The incident was ruled a suicide. Many believed he was probably murdered by a police officer or a police officer's relative. Story 5. I had night classes in a college for adults to complete their high school education. There was a man about 25 years old with high-functioning autism who always did whatever he wanted. Sometimes he ran around the class and disrupted others, but he was otherwise cheerful. He traveled to school on his own as well. This was when the movie Skyfall had just been released in theaters. One day, after a 30-minute class break, he came back limping and smiling. It turned out he had jumped from the 4th floor of the school down to the ground level. Then he happily walked back up to class with broken legs and arms. Nobody knew how he climbed up the stairs. He said he wanted to be the man from Skyfall. Story 6. Two girls went to prom together, but this was in the 1980s and it made the news. Story 7. Back in the 1990s, crop circles appeared in a wheat field just outside of town. Every hippie from all over the Pacific Northwest showed up burning incense and sage. Ever since then, they changed the theme of the town's annual festival to a UFO theme. Story 8. Beast of Blenheim, stupefied, sexually assaulted women and children. Bestiality. Story 9. A teacher started dating a student and moved her into his home, or so I heard. It made the news. She cut contact with her parents, last I remember. Story 10. A man hired a woman and her boyfriend for some work on his property. Then he killed the boyfriend and chained the woman in a shipping container. Some real horror movie material. Story 11. It has been 12 years since a 14-year-old girl was raped and murdered on the hiking trail around our village. Yet, it hangs over our quiet little village like a threatening storm cloud that never left. They caught the men who did it, a man in his 20s and his father. They are both still in prison. But the feeling of our shattered illusion of safety never disappeared. People still feel vulnerable. If you learn anything about quiet little villages, it is that the illusion of safety is a prominent feature. Leaving the car and house doors unlocked. No porch pirates. Friendly police officers with a ready smile. Take that away and half the romantic appeal disappears. A father and son took that from us. As bad as rape and murder are, they did much worse. The whole village still feels the terror. Story 12. A man was murdered by 4 teenagers from his building while walking his dog into the nearby grove at night for no reason. They were bored and under the influence. They saw him from their balcony as he exited the building with his dog, followed him into the grove, struck him in the head with a rock, killed his dog, and beat him to death. Since all of them were underage, none of them served time in prison. Story 13. In 1989, Jeff Lundgren, a cult leader from Kirtland, Ohio, separated from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He declared himself a prophet and believed he needed to make a sacrifice. He killed a family of 5 and buried them in a barn. Story 14. High school junior year, a classmate in my grade killed his mother, his 15-year-old sister, and his 6-year-old sister. This was around 2003, the first triple homicide in our city since the 1970s. It was heartbreaking. Story 15. The State Park Cemetery's groundskeeper in my town was murdered by Andrew Cunanan, the person who also murdered Johnny Versace. Story 16. A young boy ran away from home. The whole town was alerted, and people rallied together, forming search parties and sending out alerts across the state. A few weeks later, the parents were arrested. It turned out the mother killed him with a hammer, and they staged the entire scene to fake the runaway. Dressing against the window, food wrappers in the field behind the house leading to the road, and so on. Story 17. A teacher was fired for inappropriate behavior with two students who were sisters. He allegedly sent them text messages and used Snapchat to communicate, took them for rides, and went to McDonald's at night with them. He slept overnight at their house many times, and on one occasion, reportedly slept in their bed with them. The older student reportedly ended up dating him. Story 18. A high school teacher was too friendly with some of the students and always wore inappropriate outfits to class. She was fired and arrested a year later for inappropriate relations with a student. Some of us still talk about how unusual she was. Story 19. A couple of blocks down lived the police officer who killed George Floyd. Not great, but it was certainly the main topic for a while. Story 20. When I was in 8th grade, one of my friends from church took her own life. She was from a prominent family in our small town, and it made the front page of the newspaper with her picture. My habit was to read the newspaper when I got home from school, but my mother hid it from me that day so she could tell me instead of letting me just see it there on the front page. I felt so bad for her family, having their tragedy splashed all over the front page. Far more details were included than would be done today. When I was in high school, there was an axe murder in the western end of our county. A man murdered his father. Story 21. Shortly after the events of Columbine High School, a student at my school made a list with a date and time, then published it on a website hosting service. The school found out on the day of the planned attack and contacted the hosting service, which deleted the site. The school was evacuated, and we all went home to find out what was happening. The student did not get in trouble because when the school demanded the site be deleted, the hosting service complied and as a result destroyed all evidence against the student. Story 22. A man murdered 35 people at a local historic site. The Prime Minister said, "Hand over all your guns that are too powerful for the purposes you have them." People complied, and nothing like that has happened again here, anywhere nearby, or even in my country. Story 23. A former disgruntled student broke in and set the administrative offices on fire. A wing of the school was severely damaged, but what I mostly remember was not having to go to school for 2 weeks. Story 24. At my high school, the driver's education teacher died in a car crash. We had a big memorial for him in the auditorium, and his identical twin brother showed up, but none of us knew he had a twin brother. It was a surprising moment. There was also a student with a very pronounced posterior, and we called him Big Booty James. That young man was later shot. In my class, there was a student with significant behavioral problems. He would eat spiders for attention, flick himself in the eye, and pull out all his eyebrows. A few years after we graduated, he murdered his girlfriend. Those are some incidents that come to mind. Story 25. A child did inappropriate things to a deer he hunted. There was a video. Anyone from Holly Springs or Fuquay-Varina, North Carolina, can confirm. This occurred between 2016 and 2018. Story 26. I can see the hill where Edward II's catamite and favorite Piers Gaveston was dragged on a hurdle and decapitated on the orders of various earls. Prior to that, the Saxon burg dating to around 870 AD was the scene of a Viking siege that ended with about 50 Vikings hung on gibbets. There has been plenty of other activity over the last 1300 years or so. Story 27. High school principal involved in an inappropriate relationship with a 17-year-old girl in his office. This occurred multiple times before he was caught. The incident took place in 2005. The newspaper article provided detailed coverage of the case. Story 28. The school principal had a 14-year-old daughter who would slip into the boys' restrooms every lunchtime and engage with anyone who gave her cigarettes. She would also have inappropriate relationships with teachers in the gym after work. This continued for about 10 months, and after it all came to light, it was called the smoke for a poke affair. They did not call the authorities because the principal would have been embarrassed, the school might have been shut down, and many of the males involved could have faced legal consequences. Additionally, she refused to name anyone. It is also unlikely her father had any idea how many people were involved. Story 29. Well, this will be easily found, but it's too good a story not to share. Be me. Teen. Go eat pizza. New place. Fresh startup pizza spot. Owner making pizza himself. Wow, so good. Best taste. Drool. Owner comes and asks about it and I'm like, okay. Food is yum but bro looks like a psycho. Turns out, at that moment, his deceased wife's body was in the house. He killed her with a ball-peen hammer to make room for his new girlfriend who was flying in from Antarctica. And the police knew but couldn't get the warrant for another 3 days. Story 30. The football coach and science teacher dated a junior girl in my class year. She then started dating the baseball coach and eventually married him. The first coach had an affair with the second coach's wife, and when she ended it, the first coach drove them into a lake and killed them both. It was quite a situation. Story 31. A man named Marshall Ledbetter took LSD, broke into the state capitol, and barricaded himself in an office. He sent his demands to the local rock radio station. He wanted 666 donuts and a vegetarian pizza with extra jalapeno. The pizza place that made the pizza kept a Ledbetter pizza on the menu for years afterward. Ted Bundy also caused problems here. More recently, there have been numerous political scandals. Corruption is so common that people no longer react to it. Story 32. When I was in middle school, a man posing as a janitor entered my school and assaulted a girl. He was on the news for a day and was never mentioned again. Story 33. The senior prank that went too far and made the local news. Story 34. I did my first attempt. It took many years for it to be forgotten. I still regret failing. Story 35. Susan was injured after being hit by a train on the way home from school. Story 36. This actually happened shortly after I left, but I still knew people who went to the school when it occurred. A fight broke out in one of the cafeterias, and the new principal at the time had no idea how to handle it. Story 37. I mean, it wasn't really the thing, but I lived in the country about 12 miles from our school. It was 2006. I lived a mile from a kid who was a grade above me. He and his younger brother rode the bus with us daily and never missed. Their house was the second to last on a dead-end road where the last house had a loop in the yard. We usually picked them up on the first pass. The house was dark, and no one was on the road to get on. We waited a couple of minutes. Nothing. We got to school. In English class around 10 a.m., we went into lockdown and no one knew why. Apparently, the night before, the younger brother and their mom had gone somewhere for the night while the older kid and his dad were at home. The kid went up behind his dad in the yard and shot him in the head with a shotgun. He dragged his body behind the garage about 50 yards from the road. The next morning, when no one got on the bus, the kid was just chilling in the house, and the dad's body was behind the garage. He had planned to burn the body. Someone had noticed, and the kid ran in his car, hence the lockdown. The kid was sentenced to 20 years and is currently on work release. He will probably be out by Christmas. Story 38. Students made a teacher leave the school permanently. I studied in a school that mostly had wealthy students. The wealthy kids were mostly spoiled, though not all. Because of this, the teacher was forced to leave the hostel by the boys in our class. Story 39. A guy I went to high school with murdered his mother, shooting her in a movie theater. Apparently, his father persuaded him to do it somehow. If you must know, the film was Robin Hood Men in Tights. Story 40. In 1991, my hometown thought it would be a great idea to have an annual fire department versus police basketball game to raise money for drug abuse resistance education. Exactly one game was played, and one of the police officers gave a speech for drug abuse resistance education. When it was over, in the early hours of the following morning, The state police came through town and arrested several police officers for drug dealing, including the one who gave that speech. I only know about this because we have video of my dad playing on the fire department's team. Story 41. I grew up in Columbus, Georgia. In 1977, when I was 5, a serial rapist and murderer began targeting older women in my grandmother's neighborhood. He killed 7 or 8 women before he was caught. He was nicknamed the Stocking Strangler because he strangled the women with pantyhose. I remember how stressed my father was about his mother living alone. He had burglar bars installed on all her windows, and she slept with a fake gun by her front door, visible from outside. Overall, the experience caused serious anxiety in my life. Story 42. An elderly woman was murdered, and it was rumored the murderers were 2 brothers, both in high school. Both boys heard the rumors and admitted they killed the woman for laughs. They must have been playing to the crowd and enjoying their notoriety, as the police never arrested either of them. The police arrested a middle-aged man, and he went to prison. The school rumors suggested the boys were from a wealthy family who paid someone else to take the blame, while the brothers were from a well-to-do family, paying someone else. I don't know about that. How much money would be enough to spend the rest of your life in prison or, worse, receive the death penalty? You couldn't spend the money sitting in a prison cell. I knew one of the brothers. He was a year younger than me. While he had a dark mood and acted tough, I don't think the parents would have ever set someone else up for the murder if their sons did it. Neither had a police record, and I doubt either would have wanted to ruin their lives permanently. Neither lived in the woman's neighborhood where she was killed, and it seems unlikely either would have even known about her or where she lived. The person who was arrested was someone who lived in her neighborhood and was more likely to have known her daily habits. Story 43. At age 14, the daughter of a teacher paid her boyfriend and an acquaintance to kill her parents. They killed her father. Her mother survived with dozens of stab wounds. The daughter is now serving a life sentence in prison. Story 44. Chuck E. Cheese shooting. Batman Theater shooting. Columbine shooting. Story 45. A man entered a popular hair salon and shot his wife, who was working there. Story 46. The dean of students was caught in a chat room soliciting who he thought was a minor. He was working for a Catholic preparatory school, and it happened around the time I was taking campus tours in 8th grade. Back then, social media and content creation were nowhere near as developed as they are now, so it stood out to me that someone wrote a silly comedy rap about it. Because we were a group of immature boys in a conservative environment, we thought it was funny that his online handle referenced Oberon, the literary king of the fairies. Story 47. In high school, the study hall teacher was fired and charged for inappropriate conduct with students. Story 48. High school. 2 girls became pregnant. They both said it was 2 other boys from another school. Then a rumor spread that they had a threesome with the baseball coach. Everyone knew it was fake, just a rumor. Then one day the coach was no longer at the school and did not come back. The girls were sent to an outside school for troubled teens. Later, a video surfaced. It might have been real. It was the 1990s. The rumor was that the coach had recorded it on VHS and some kid somehow got a copy. A few students went to watch it in the library where no teachers could see. Before they watched much, police arrived and took the tape. It was unclear if the video was just some random adult film stolen from a student's father, or if it really showed the coach with the girls. The topic was discussed for the rest of the year. Nowadays, it would have been shared online. Story 49. Teacher got impaled in the eye with a pencil somebody threw. Story 50. I was 16 or 17 years old. A strange young boy, 17 years old, followed me home during the day. I lived in an apartment. He followed me up my stairs. I was very scared, and fortunately, a neighbor came down just then. He left. Several days later, this young man followed me again, this time one morning as I went to high school. I ran very fast and I was very scared. He seemed really disturbed. Unfortunately, that same day, all the students were summoned to the school courtyard. A young girl had been attacked behind the school. I learned later that it was a sexual assault. I immediately made the connection with the strange boy who had followed me twice. I went to the police. I recognized the individual in a photo. There was never a trial because the boy committed suicide before being arrested. Story 51. It turns out my middle school drama teacher had been sexually abusing boys in the attic of the middle school, which his room had direct access to, for 20 years before he got caught. This happened shortly after he retired. If you search for Mr. Wells in New Jersey, his name is likely to come up. Story 52. A good number of students from my year in school are in prison for sexual offenses, not including the 3 individuals convicted of child sexual abuse. Story 53. Shamefully, this actually involves a couple of my best friends from high school toward the end of our junior year. I think it was Saturday night. Our whole crew was hanging out, watching movies, and 2 of our friends said they were going to go home. Around 1 a.m., I was asleep on the couch in the basement at our mutual friend's house, where several of us had dozed off watching movies. My cell phone rang and woke me up. It was the mother of one of the friends, and she wanted to know if we had seen her son because he never came home. I woke everybody up, and we all tried calling both of them, but we weren't getting answers. So we started getting ready to go out and search for them, thinking maybe they had gotten in an accident. Then the phone rang, and it was one of the friends. We told him to call his mother, and then we all went back to our respective homes to sleep. The next day, we found out exactly where they were. That year, they were building a new high school to be opened our senior year. It was under construction. One of the friends lived in the neighborhood across the street from the new school. They had parked their cars at his house and decided to go on an adventure to the new school. They went through the building, smashing windows and doors. They pulled light bulbs out of the ballasts and smashed them. They found some spray paint and went around tagging the building. One of them actually spray painted his nickname on the basketball backboard, and the next year you could still see the outline of it even after they cleaned it. Of course, they couldn't help but brag to everybody they could. So while the police and the school were looking for the perpetrators, pretty much everybody in school knew about it and thought it was great. That lasted for about a week or 2. One of these guys had been seeing a girl from our tennis class. She was a freshman and already had a freshman boyfriend, but he was the bad boy junior, and she was giving him a shot. The freshman boyfriend did not like this, and when word got to him about who had done this and that the police were looking for them, he went to the police and let them know. They brought that friend into the office to speak with the principal and the police, and he refused to talk without a lawyer present. They brought in our other friend and told him that the previous friend had already confessed and to tell the truth or face serious consequences. He broke down and told them everything. They were both removed from school by the police and taken to jail. Story 54. The child with autism who put his arm in the tiger cage at the traveling circus and lost his arm. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.